Hello, Laziali all over the world. Welcome to a really special episode of Lazio Lounge. And for every Lazio fan, today is a real special day. And no, put your champagne bottle back in the fridge because it's not because Alasdair is leaving, but because Sarri today is arriving to Rome to talk with Lotito and Fabiani to prepare the new season. Because, and here it is, Alasdair, Sarri is the new Lazio manager. What a surprise, right?
Yeah. You know what's funny? I was telling you just before we started recording that I went back to start listening to the podcast we did when he left. And in that podcast, we were complaining about the fact that Sarri's resignation came 30 minutes after we'd published our podcast. Whereas this time, like almost a year later, his announcement that he's coming back happened maybe about 30 minutes after our podcast. So he keeps thwarting us, Maurizio Sarri, but I'm still happy to see him back.
No, definitely. I think it's the perfect decision for Lazio. I mean, moving from Baroni, with no offense for Baroni, to Sarri, it's a huge step forward. Before we start talking about Sarri, he's coming back to Lazio, what everything is going to change. Sean, this podcast started 10 minutes later because what you tweeted in the live chat of Lazio Lounge. Alice had to check Mauro Zarate playing against Matteo Musacchio. So if we are late, it's all because of you.
Yeah, I mean, I am so delighted about this. In our Patreon chat, Sean mentioned the fact that Zarate was playing against Musacchio, and it took a bit of research to work out what the hell he was talking about because they were both retired. Kings League. We might have to start a Kings League podcast, Vittorio, if this is what's happening. And I discovered on the Kings League website that Matteo Musacchio has a 90 shot rating. So, I mean, whatever the standard of the Kings League is, it can't be great.
Shot rating in his own goal or in the opponent goal? This would be a valid question, right?
It doesn't clarify, to be fair.
Before we start, we have to say a big thanks to Sergej Gajdek. I hope I pronounced it right. New Aquilotto, new Patreon on our Lazio Lounge page, patreon.com/Lazio Lounge. Sergej, I have to tell you, I'm a little bit concerned because you said you had to sell your kidney to pay for a subscription. So Alice pointed out you just need one, so you can sell one for. But, I didn't think...
Most listeners should consider that really one for you, one for us.
Well, we thought the membership wasn't that expensive, but I mean, maybe your kidney it's not that worth it. What are you doing with your life? But thanks, Sergey. Really appreciate your help and the support of all our Patreon. You can subscribe patreon.com/Lazio Lounge. Membership starts at $2 a month. There's an extra pod every single month with our Q&A. So thanks to all our listeners, thanks to all our supporters. Alasdair, I have to tell you, 1 month ago, I wouldn't expect to see Sarri coming back to Lazio. The names linked to Lazio, as usual, were terrible. Vieira, Gilardino, even Klose for me is not ready for Lazio. Sarri's back. I think it's a really good sign for the future. Too optimistic?
No, I think like we kind of covered off the start of the last pod, I think the majority of fans feel that way. There's certainly an undercurrent of those who aren't as happy about it, and we'll probably have to discuss that his record obviously was mixed, particularly how things unraveled towards the end of his spell, resulting in that resignation in the first place. But I think that for me, it's positive for quite a few different reasons. I mean, I think that if Baroni was to leave, Lazio needed to make a statement, because bringing in another kind of untested coach or a coach from lower down Serie A with no experience of European football, and not that we have to worry about that next year, but a less experienced coach at a big club, that would have been problematic in terms of getting the fans back on board, because we can't forget how bad the atmosphere was by the end of the season, the boos at the end of the year, the boos at the start of the year. There's a lot of work to be done really within the club to rebuild that trust and that relationship, which was very strong for quite a long time under Sarri. So I think he'll certainly help with that. And also I think that I think a lot of my optimism is hooked on the fact that I can only imagine that the conditions are better now, and that is why he's back. That's why he's agreed to do this, is because the squad changes that happened, the players he had issues with are no longer here, that he supposedly has been given more say, more powers in terms of the transfer market and the kind of players he'll be able to actually bring in over the summer. And I guess that having spent a long time while at Lazio complaining about the relentless fixture list, he might actually quite like the idea of being out of Europe for a year, because it gives him that first year to really build something without having to constantly be getting thrown around, going on trips to Bulgaria or whatever. So I do think it's definitely a positive move, as long as all those things turn out to be what I think they'll be.
Yes, Lotito yesterday said that he cleaned the locker room of Lazio. Yeah. He said, I have a cleaning society, so this is what I do. And clear reference to Luis Alberto and Ciro Immobile, who left the club. And those players look to have problems, or more than problems, they were in focus 100% in the last year of Sarri, and this had a huge impact. Obviously, compared to that team, this is a team younger with less quality, though, Alasdair. I mean, you can complain that Luis Alberto and Ciro Immobile weren't running like 4 years ago, but they still bring quality that this team probably doesn't have. So this is the biggest question mark. We made a poll, Alasdair, after the announcement, and we asked, are you happy about Sarri back to Lazio? I would say that only 73% of our listeners said yes, 12.9 said no, and 13.5 said it depends. And basically, all the people depending said, well, it depends on the addition. It depends if Lotito is going to spend money. So this is our biggest concern, right, Alasdair? Yes, Sarri's back, but then you need to build a team, right? You need to bring quality, to bring players that can fit to the 4-3-3 of Sarri, right? This is the biggest question mark.
Yeah. And if you look at the last Maurizio Sarri lineup from that defeat to Udinese, the worrying thing is kind of like all the good players are gone and all the kind of squad players are still there. There hasn't been Luis Alberto, Anderson and Immobile just haven't been replaced for all the issues that might have been there in the background, for all that he might have felt betrayed by the locker room and that he'd lost control of the situation, or that he simply couldn't do anything else to change a team that, to be honest, we had a long time had suspicions or reason to question the mentality within that group long before Sarri, but he got to a point where he felt he just couldn't do anything else to change the situation. But the problem is, like you say, that the level of quality certainly hasn't gone up. And it's a big job ahead to work out how we do that, especially after a summer mercato where we have to call it a failure, really, because nobody made a huge impact apart from Nuno Tavarez for 3 months at the start of the year. And I think that the good thing is, in terms of talking about building a team for Sarri, I don't think that transformation now is nearly as big as it was when he took over from Inzaghi. Yeah. If you think of moving from Inzaghi's 3-5-2 to Sarri's 4-3-3, that was a big thing that concerned us at the time. How are we going to have the mercato to do this? I don't think there's as big a jump to happen there. But I guess, Vittorio, the question is, like, a year out of Europe and so on, how do we fund this? How do we attract the players? Who can we sell? Like, how do we even start to create the kind of squad that Sarri can use to get us back into the
Yeah,
Champions
that's
League.
why Fabiani said in the last couple of days that we are not going to sell top players, our top players. You know, he referenced Hila, Guendouzi, Rovella, and so on. I think this is not going to happen. I mean, obviously, we're not going to sell all our key players, but as you were saying, without a Europe League, by the way, it looks like Lazio from the Europe League revenue is around 24.2 million euros, which is not bad. Lazio is the fourth team for revenue from the Europe League of last year, so that's not bad again. But you know, you need money if you want a good number 9. You're gonna need to sell someone to make money, to have money available to spend it. So I think, Alasdair, 1 or 2 key players is gonna be sold if Sarri wants some transfer market deals. Now the biggest question is, who can you sell? You know, an example, Zaccagni has been linked to Napoli. I don't know. This season wasn't great from Zaccagni. He's not getting any younger. I think he's turning 30, right? So, you know, for 20, 25 million euros, I would sell Zaccagni, to be honest with you. So I think it's important to understand who can you sell and who you can't. You know, I would keep Rovella anyway, but so that's, yep.
It's a risky game, though,
Yeah.
isn't it? Because Zaccagni, for all his inconsistency, for all the frustrations watching him and feeling like he doesn't make the impact you hope all the time, he is the player with the most quality we have left in that attack.
Which tells you a lot.
And that's already a very different attack to the one that Sarri left, which was Zaccagni with Anderson and Immobile. So if you do sell him, the pressure is on to make sure that whoever you bring in hits the ground running immediately. And we can't forget too that, and it's not to say that we should necessarily expect Sarri Part 2 is going to be exactly the same as Sarri Part 1. You know, he has had more than a year out of the game. The club's moved forward. There's a different squad. But obviously, the fact that he has been here before means that we should bring up the issues that there were before. And one of the biggest ones with that was the attack, not really scoring enough goals. The football became pretty stodgy. They didn't create an awful lot of chances. When we fell behind in games, we really struggled to ever get back into them again. And that's been very different to the way Marco Baroni has played. This season, Tati Castellanos has been given the number 9 shirt, but his chance conversion rate is not good, as we know. He scores the spectacular goals and misses the easy ones. And I don't think he'll get away with that in a Maurizio Sarri team if it plays in a similar way to how it did last time. So I think that thing of the quality, I can see what you mean, Zaccagni being expendable. I don't think he's untouchable by any means, but I do think we need to be very careful with the players we choose to let go, just because before you know it, you can end up with a front 3 of Tati, Noslin, and Chauna, and I don't know if they're going to convert the one chance that we create in a match.
I'm leaving the podcast after this. Thank you. I was so happy, so confident. Now with this trio, I'm really... Yeah, let's talk about Kingsley and Zara de Musacchio. No, seriously, there's something, Alasdair, another thing we have to talk about is, you mention it often, there's not European competition this season. So we have a list of 23 players. We don't need it next season, right? Especially because we are moving from Baroni, who rotate a lot of players, to Sarri, who is a little bit like Antonio Conte, right? He stick to 12, 13 players, and that's it. The others are like, you know, training with the rest of the squad, but not really having an opportunity. So talking about transfer market, this means that you can really reduce the number of players you need. So you mentioned Nosley. We have like 7 strikers at the moment. I don't really think we need that many. So, you can sell Nosley, Dia, and Castellanos. That's another discussion. I mean, probably Sarri wants to bring another number 9. So one of between Dia and Castellano has to leave. At the moment, as we speak, Lazio has 3 plays. Cataldi, who's come back from Fiorentina, Belayan, who hardly played, and Roella. Obviously, here, we need maybe 2, but definitely not 3. We have 5 central defenders, 5 fullbacks. Again, we have players who you could sell that we really don't need. Obviously, it's easy to say it, it's difficult to achieve it. Everybody would agree that we don't need Toma Basic, but it's 3 years that we don't need him, and he's still there. It's not easy to sell Toma Basic. It's not easy to sell Zai. We have a lot of these fringe players that everybody agrees saying, yes, sell them. Yes, but you have to find a stupid club who's willing to pay them, right? So this is where the issue rises, right? I mean, nobody will say, no, let's keep Basic, we need it. Yeah, okay, let's find a club who's interested in Toma. Kamenovic is coming back, guys. Kamenovic. We have a lot of good players, right?
I have a feeling this could be Kamenovic's season, Vittorio. You can't rule it out. Yeah, exactly. All the loan players coming back too. It does add in a bit
Fares.
Yeah, Mohamed Fares, Marcos Antonio. Yeah, I mean, it's complicated. It is really complicated. I think putting a positive spin on this, they moved quickly. That was the absolute first thing we said they had to do, was move quickly to make a decision on all of this, whether Baroni's staying or not, and if he's not, getting someone in who's getting a good quality replacement in fast. And the fact it's the 5th of June and Sarri has already been confirmed for a few days is almost miraculous for Lazio standards of speed. I think that is really, really good. Sarri is a coach who can get the best out of players. And I do think that if he has a proper pre-season, even with a lower quality squad, I think we do have to raise the quality of the squad, don't get me wrong. But I do think if he can properly train this team and have a week to prepare between each game and so on. I mean, you mentioned the Antonio Conte comparison. I don't think that applies so to the style of football so much, but the attitude, yeah, absolutely. The smaller squad, the focus between each games, the minute detail in preparation, all these things. And, and Napoli are a good example of that this season, where they've really got the best out of the players they have because of the way that Conte has understood how to use them and how to get the best out of them. I mean, Scott McTominay has not been scoring 12 goals a year for many reasons, but one of them has been that his coaches have failed to understand what his best use is, and Conte understood that immediately. And I think Sarri is capable of doing that and getting a better level out of the players we already have. The thing is, he's probably going to have to kind of cherry pick who those players are. I'm sure he'll already be doing this, but he'll have to work out, like, from what he's seen from Chauna over this season, for example, is this guy just in need of more direction? Is this guy got the raw ability to improve and to really make an impact under Sarri's coaching, or is he simply not good enough? And, you can copy and paste that kind of dilemma across quite a few players in this squad. But I do hope that under Sarri, we can see better performances out of some of the players who have underperformed this season. That's my one kind of optimistic outlook on the squad that we currently have.
So, listener, shall we put a €1 fine for every time Alasdair mentioned a Scottish player? I mean, even this podcast, he was able to mention a Scottish player. This is getting incredible. This is getting embarrassing, really.
Imagine if we signed one.
You're going to do a private podcast only on the Scottish player. Yeah, can see it happen.
Imagine if Samuel Gigot changes his nationality.
Samuel Gigot could be a player leaving this summer. I don't see him really fit for Sarri's ball. But Alasdair, one thing really important of Sarri coming back is that one of the conditions that he accepted to come back is that he's going to have he's going to be important in the transfer market. It looks like, obviously, it has to get confirmed, but it looks like he will have the last word on selling players and replacing them, which is really important for us because, I mean, what we said every podcast pretty much, like you mentioned Scottish players, we said the problem is not Lazio selling players, is replacing them because you sold Milinkovic Savic, and who did you get instead? You sold Luis Alberto, and we signed Dia. You sold Ciro Immobile and signed Dia. It's not the same level of players, right? So with Sarri saying, no, you cannot sell Rovella or you cannot sell Zaccagni, this is a huge guarantee for us. Oh, okay, you said Zaccagni, but you're going to get Berardi. That's what we need, Alasdair. That's the positive thing of Sarri coming back. Because let's be honest, Sarri is a top manager, and I think we all agree on that. But the most important thing is the players. If Fabiani sell a top player, Rovella, and sign, I don't know, the classic Verona player who we don't need, then you can have even Guardiola on the bench. It's going to get worse, right? So this is the most positive thing about everything. Obviously, we have to see if Fabiani and Lotito keep the words this summer, or they said, oh, look, I forgot. I sold it before asking you. You weren't available. You were on the phone, so I had to give an answer in 3 minutes, and so I sold Rovella. But that's probably the most important thing, Alasdair, right? The most encouraging thing.
Yeah, definitely, because I don't think either of us have any particular trust in the way things have been going up until now, the way that the market has been operated. I mean, look, there's been a lot of chat in the last week or so about Iglitari because he's obviously back with Milan in Serie A. And I think it's actually been quite a useful time to reflect on that, I guess, because Tari's story at Lazio is obviously an interesting one. But I think if we look back at when that absolute hot streak he had, the deals that he made, the best deals he made for Immobile, for Alberto, for Lucas Leiva, even for like Miro Klose, a lot of the time he was able to find players who did have a higher level of quality, who had basically underperformed at big clubs, but that wasn't necessarily a judgment on their own ability so much as it not being a good match, but were undervalued as a result, that had a point to prove mentally, which makes a big difference. Not players who are at the end of their careers and like, Modric going to Milan now. I don't really see what that brings, but I think that Lazio, to get those kind of deals, they're even guys coming to end of contracts, and they are still able to bring in high quality players without paying a ridiculous amount of money. But you've really got to be getting ahead of that quite far in advance. Yeah, you've got to be, that's where the speed comes into it. And this is what worries me in terms of the chances of Lazio bringing in a really high quality of players this summer, is that if they've only just decided now Sarri's coming in and we're going to give him a say in the transfer market, that presumably means that only now are they starting to talk about what they want to do in the transfer market. They might already have some ideas, but I doubt there are many kind of soups cooking in the background already.
Yeah, I understand what you're saying, and you're right. But probably this is the first season where things have changed. I mean, who is the new Inter manager? We don't know. Milan just announced Allegri, and I don't think they had it in the back pocket 3 months ago. Roma just changed manager, and they still didn't announce it. Juventus, are they keeping Tudor? So every big team except Napoli, who's going to win the title in the September for me, haven't changed manager. So I think they're all still planning their future. So this is important. One thing, Alasdair, we have to point out that nobody mentioned, and I think it's really, really important. I think it's going to have a huge impact. And I think a little bit, we know this already. Fabiani finished 7th last year, 7th this year. If he failed this season, he's going to be gone. Because we know that Lotito will never take charge of failing, right? So last year it was the players. This year was Baroni. Well, next year it has to be the sport director, right? Can be the manager, you change it twice. Can be the players, you change everybody. So it has to be the sport director. So I think Fabiani knows this, and that's why he signed Sarri immediately. That's why I think he's going to try to do a very good transfer market, because otherwise he's gone. And for people who are not aware, in the last 11 years, Fabiani have been working only with Lotito. This means is that if Lotito fired him, I don't think he's going to be working anymore, because no one looked for him in the past 11 years, right? So I think Fabiani is in a hot seat, and he's going to try to do his best to put Lazio in a good position, because if Lazio finish 7th again, 3rd year in a row, he's going to go, right?
Yeah, and it's funny how the whole atmosphere there has changed, because we've gone from last summer where the main question most people had is Baroni too much of a yes man? You know, have the club brought in a guy with less experience because he's not going to resist what they get him? You know, he's not going to put up a big fight about the level of players he's being bought or whatever. There were a lot of those discussions going on at the time. Whereas now we've gone into the complete opposite situation of Maurizio Sarri coming in on the understanding, on the condition that he will have a big say in the kind of players that are signed. And that is important, because he has a very clear style he wants to imprint on this team. And there's no point in bringing in the wrong guys. I mean, you know, like the kind of Iglitare constantly signing wingers issue of just bringing in square pegs and round holes kind of thing. So I think it's fascinating to see. I think, like, when we're looking at reports and so on of what's being talked about so far, there is a lot of talk about shopping in the relegated market and getting Fazzini or getting Colpani and, you know, these kind of guys where, you know, there are clearly, because teams have been relegated, it doesn't mean they don't have good individuals. But I just think that that can't be your main event in the market. I think it's fine to try and sign some of these guys, but I think that we need, in order to raise the quality and get it to where we want it to be, that needs to not be the main thing, and it can be an additional thing to some other big deals that we're looking to get.
Well, I'm not sure about that, because, for example, Pio Esposito, the number 9 of Spezia, I think he's really, really good, and I would love to sign him. Obviously, he's coming from Serie B. Yeah. The problem is he's an Inter player, but he's 19. He scored like 70 goals in Serie B and 2 in the playoff. I mean, that would be the perfect Lazio signing, in my point of view. Young, talented, an incredible future for me. I mean, that would be the right option. I understand when you say, you know, Colpani, well, he had a terrible career, the season with Fiorentina. He hardly played. Fazzini could be an option. He played decent with Empoli, even though he was a Baroni player, let's call it like that. We don't know if Sarri valued the player the same way Baroni did. But what you said before is right. You have to go and sign, you know, the player. Federico Chiesa is pretty much impossible due to the salary. But that's the player you have to find, right? The player that's not playing with Liverpool, but Liverpool signed them. So you know he has quality. Simply, Salah is too good. He's not going to play. Go to Real Madrid and sign, you know, the central defender who is not playing, because above him there are quality players, etc. I think you have to do a mix of that, and then go and sign the youngsters from the Serie B. Now, the question is, do we have the money to do it?
Well, that's the other thing. I mean, you said just before we recorded, you were tweeting about how Lazio have made, what, 25 million, did you say?
4.2.
From the Europa League. that's something. I mean, I still find it hard to believe we'll sell Mario Gila for 50 million euros. But if we did, then that would obviously help. I would take that immediately if we got offered 50 million, because you can really reinvest that well.
Let's remember that Lazio will get only 35.
Good point. Well, it's still a lot though, isn't it? Still a lot. I mean, but yeah, it's obviously complicated. The whole thing is complicated because pretty much every area of the squad needs looked at. And yeah, it's not going to be cheap. And we've just had a summer where we were supposed to have done this big reinvention of the squad. So I think you're right about Fabiani and the pressure on him, certainly.
Alasdair, I have a couple of questions for you because there are a lot of rumors. The number one is, since Sarri signed with Lazio, a lot of outlets are saying, Provedel is going to be the starter again. This is what Sarri wants. Are you convinced that Provedel will be the starter instead of Mandas? Because, yes, it makes sense. Provedel is better with his feet, but a goalkeeper has to save the shots, right? And at the end of the day, let's remember what happened with Reina in Strakosha. Reina started, but when he started making mistakes, and we said it in this podcast often, then Strakosha came in, and who cared about his feet? He's a goalkeeper. First thing is, don't allow stupid goals. Then we can talk about the feet, right? So what do you think is going to happen? Is Provedel going to start? There's going to be competition? What's your thought?
Well, I think the circumstances are very different because Mendes wasn't really, he hadn't really proven himself at all at that point under Sarri. So it wasn't as much of a call to make. And Provedel, I think, will start ahead in that race just from the fact that under Sarri, he had the best season of his career. The year we finished second, record number of clean sheets. What was it, 21 in Serie A?
Do you remember what a clean sheet is?
Well, yeah, I mean, but this is one of the things we've had when people are commenting on the poll you put out. I mean, people do complain that they find the football boring, that they remember how kind of dull and predictable everything got towards the end. But people do also remember the fact that we could actually defend under Sarri, it was probably too far in the other direction from Marco Baroni. They're just so poles apart, really, in the way that they played the game. But, someone did mention we're probably not going to be losing games 5 or 6-0 like we were this season under Sarri. And I do think Provedel, because he had that amazing year under Sarri, he'll start with a better chance than he did under Baroni starting the new season. But Mendes is definitely in a better position because he's finished as the number one choice goalkeeper. He's young. He's got potential to improve. I don't think his game with his feet is bad. I think he needs to improve certain elements of it, but it tends to be really kind of like hit or miss. And some of the passes he hits are absolutely incredible, but for each one of those, he'll smack one out into the stands for a throw-in. So
yeah, especially long ball,
we'll
really
see.
Accurate.
Yeah, exactly.
Alasdair, you know what fascinated me is that people remembers only the last year of Sarri when we struggle, etc. It looks like when we arrived second, we didn't have a manager, right? Because everybody said, Sarri ball is boring, we don't score, etc. The year before, we arrived second, 21 clean sheet. I would pay every year to finish second every season in Serie A. Even if we play the most boring football ever, second in Serie A, guys. Why people forget about this? Maurizio Sarri was the manager when Lazio finished second. We never, ever finished second with Simone Inzaghi. Even the season of COVID, where we were fighting for the title, we arrived fourth, guys. Let's not forget it. Why, Alasdair? People remember only the bad part of Sarri and not the positive one.
Because it's recency bias. That's kind of how football fans operate, isn't it? Like the thing that happened most recently is the most important thing. So yeah, I mean, I think Sarri's record speaks for itself, to be honest. Not just the second place, but taking us into the knockout stages of the Champions League. I mean, Inzaghi managed that once, but otherwise that hasn't happened since the early 2000s. So that was no mean feat in itself. Beating Bayern Munich in one of those two legs as well, we shouldn't forget. So yeah, I think probably the fact that he didn't actually win anything ultimately works against him a bit, and then certainly the fact that he didn't achieve the holy grail for Lazio in the 21st century, which is reaching back-to-back Champions Leagues, which it was beyond Inzaghi, and then it proved beyond Sarri. And then also the way the final season unfolded. I mean, I think that we shouldn't deny that was anything other than it was, which was a bit of a disaster by the time he left. But you know, we've discussed this stuff about the team letting him down and the problems in the dressing room, but we haven't mentioned that he was also having personal problems at the time as well, and that has to weigh on you. You know, that can't not have an impact in your day-to-day work like anyone else doing their job. So I do think that the third season, when he ended up resigning, there's not much of a defense for how that went, but the overall body of work we have to look at and say it's positive. And I think if we set those standards going into the second term, then we can only do better than we did just under Baroni this season.
Yeah. Another question. Do you think Nuno Tavares is fitted for Sarri ball? Because there are a lot of rumors saying, no, he's too offensive-minded left back to play for Baroni. But people would argue, well, he's our best left back. So are we selling our best left back because he's not suited to Sarri ball? And do you think he's not suited to Sarri ball?
Well, I wonder if Sarri's going to change things a bit this time or not, because I think one of the issues with the football becoming a bit stodgy and uninteresting was that we didn't attack with any particular width, and the fullbacks didn't do much attacking under Sarri at Lazio. It was kind of like a four-man defense where they were there to protect rather than to push. So I wonder if he can look at Tavarez and think of him as a tactical weapon. I mean, I think Sarri, thinking of him as a kind of chess player, Tavarez, and this is what I was saying in the last podcast, but he really offers something unique. He's so unlike anyone else, really, who plays in that position. So although I would say I can understand where that's coming from, I don't think he's a natural Sarri ball player, but this is a very interesting chess piece to be able to play. Maybe not always as a starter, maybe only in certain games, whatever, but I do think he might quite fancy the look of Tavarez as something he can use tactically. I don't know, but I mean, also we don't have that many fullbacks, do we, Vittorio? So I'm not sure. Looking at the fullbacks, otherwise are pretty much exactly the same as when he left. So
yeah, we have to say that Lazzari, he's not able to play at a certain level anymore. His eye is another player I think you should be looking to sell. Even again, it's not easy. Marzic, we know what you're getting from Marzic. He can stay as a bench player, but you should be looking forward. So it's not going to be easy to get rid of 4 fullbacks, right? It would be a miracle for Lazio to get rid of 2 of them. So I think Tavarez is staying. Alasdair, I want to finish on a high note this podcast. And this is a suggestion from one of our listeners. Gasperini is back in Rome. Gasperini is going to be the new Roma manager. So we have to bring back Bastos, right?
Oh, wait, that was a suggestion from a listener.
I think so. I don't remember. I read it on X. So.
Oh, yes. This propaganda is working. Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, God, I'd love to see him back. As we all know, him and Gigot lining up as centre back together the first day of the new season. That's the dream. Either that or playing in Kings League with Musacchio and Zarate would.
I don't finish this podcast. You're going to watch the highlights again of Musacchio and Zarate. And that's going to be the theme of your day, I guess.
But I mean, that's, we jest, but the derby is a positive thing to finish on because, look, we had a bad record in big games this season under Baroni. Didn't win a derby we should have won the second time round. And Sarri's record in the derby was excellent. I think it was won 4 out of 6 and only lost 1. So he did prove himself pretty smart in big games quite often.
Yeah, not only, but I would say he lost the first one, and then we won even with Mandas making his debut. Let's not forget about that in Coppa Italia. And I thought that was Roma was a better team with Mourinho rather than this year. So that's definitely, and we know it. One of the reasons why we complain about Baroni is his lack of experience. Sarri is an experienced manager. With him, we won a lot of important games, and he knows. You know, there's a quote I really love about Sarri. They asked him after he beat Bayern 1-0 if this was his best moment, biggest joy as a Lazio manager. And he said, let's not get fooled. I mean, the best joy is winning the derby. We know the fans love winning the derby. So that, for me, it's the most important thing as a Lazio manager. I mean, Baroni would have said, yes, beating Bayern is the biggest achievement I got, knowing that we would have lose 3-0 in the away game. Sarri, and this is weird, Alasdair, because Sarri never was a Lazio fan or never grew as a Lazio fan, but he emerged in this Lazio mentality. It was amazing. I mean, everything he said was really great. I thought he really wanted to finish as a Lazio manager his career, right? So that's probably one of the reasons he's back. He thought, well, I have some unfinished business here. I know I could have done better. I know I could have achieved more. So I'm coming back because I want to finish like this.
And he's a principled guy. Like he really is not afraid to kind of say what he thinks, stand up for things he believes in. And that was also partly, I mean, one of the things I was listening to us saying at the time, that showed with his resignation as well. He had said, if this is my fault, I'll walk away. He continually said that actually throughout that season. If I decide this is my fault and the team will be better without me, I'll walk away. And he did. And it kind of took us all by surprise because we thought, like any other coach, he was bluffing, but he wasn't. And I think that he will have come back to Lazio now for those reasons, like you say, because there's a real connection with the club and with the fan base that he felt deeply and he talked about so well. And he's not coming back just to get his career back on track, just because he's had a year out of the game and he needs a stepping stone. I think he's coming back to Lazio because he wants to be here, because he feels like there is a club here that he can do something with. So that in itself is very encouraging. And yeah, I think he's certainly someone people have a connection with, fans have a connection with too. So yeah, I think it's an exciting time. I mean, there's like we said, we've spent a lot of time talking about the problems that we've got coming up, but that would have been the same with or without Sarri. And I think
even worse,
it's going to be really interesting.
Even worse without Sarri.
Definitely. Yeah, but I definitely feel more optimistic, more positive, knowing that he's there and he's behind the scenes steering things. That gives me more faith, I think, than it would have been otherwise if Baroni had stayed.
Yeah, let's not forget, today he's coming to Rome, not to meet Alasdair, but to meet Fabiani and Lotito to decide the transfer market. So this is a very important day for us, for Lazio fan, for our future, because we hope that the program will align and, this summer is going to be really important for us. So we are both happy that Sarri is back. We're looking forward to see what happened this summer, to see what happened this season. Thanks again for our support. Thanks to our Patreon, patreon.com/Lazio Lounge. Membership starts at $2 a month. Thanks, Alasdair, for joining me. Now, the biggest question is, will you find a Scottish player to talk about in the next podcast? But who knows? I think you will.
Maybe in my Kings League podcast.
Yeah, who knows? Or maybe imagine if we sign a Scottish player. That would be the end. The end of everything. Anyway. Thanks everybody for listening. We're going to be back as soon as possible. Take care.